let's talk about rhythms. How do we get better at rhythms? How do we get better at reading rhythms? How do we get better at playing rhythms? Let's get into it. Hey, I'm Schanno Johnson, and if you don't know me, I'm a musician, composer, producer, and I make videos about all that fun stuff, music composition, music production, so make sure you hit that subscribe button to see videos like this in the future. I have found that reading rhythms has been the most difficult thing about reading notation. And I don't mean just that reading rhythms is hard, but I mean that is the first thing that makes it hard to read something and sight read something well. If I can't immediately hear what the rhythm is from the notation, or I don't immediately know what it's supposed to be, I'm not going to be able to play it. And even if it just takes a little bit of time, that's going to be a part I have to play through again to get it to sound good. So get really good at reading rhythms and playing rhythms, because that will be one major stumbling block that kind of holds you back a lot, even if the notes themselves are really easy and the combinations of notes themselves are really easy to find. So here are some tips for learning rhythms, getting better at rhythms, and learning to read rhythms better. So learn to clap and tap your foot, or play your instrument and tap your foot at the same time. This doesn't work for every single type of music, but if you're playing something that has a groove, this can be really useful because you can use your foot tapping as a way to tell yourself to keep a constant tempo. What you can do is think about the rhythms you're playing in reference to where your foot is being tapped. If there's something hard that you're playing and you want to be able to play it with a consistent tempo, be able to play it while tapping your foot. It adds a little difficulty with the coordination, but once you get used to it, you can reference your foot tapping as a constant tempo rather than having to rely on a metronome or something. Now, you still want to use a metronome because that'll keep you consistent with your tempo, but if you can get that other sense with your foot of where the tempo is, it'll help you a lot better, because tapping your foot to a constant beat is something that's pretty simple that most people can do pretty easily. Something else, get used to all the variations of quarter notes and quarter note rests. Learn them all. It is a lot to learn and it can take a while, so don't get overwhelmed and don't feel like you need to learn it in a day, but learn what they all sound like, right? Quarter note, rest, rest, quarter note versus quarter note, rest, or rest, quarter note, rest. Learn the different variations and get used to what they all sound like, and be able to identify them pretty quickly when you see them in a piece of music. And with quarter notes, I like to use ta when I teach it to my students. And the reason I like to use ta is it gives you something to sing, right? And say rest when you have a rest. So ta, rest, rest, ta, or rest, ta, ta, rest. Whatever it is, I like to use that because it gives you something to sing, and ta is going to be unique, as we'll see, to only quarter notes. Next thing, learn eighth notes and all the variations of eighth notes and eighth note rests. This one can be a little bit more than quarter notes because, well, in 4/4 at least, there are more eighth notes than quarter notes, but try and get used to what the different combinations of them are. Now, you'll probably see them in chunks. You could probably just divide it into 4 eighth notes, like groupings of 4, because you have other rhythms that are weird that do deviate from that pattern, but you can learn the common patterns first and then go to the more complicated ones. So learn what like eighth note, rest, eighth note looks like and sounds like, and then learn eighth rest, eighth note, eighth rest, eighth note for a whole bar, and learn all the different combinations of that. So learn eighth note, eighth rest, eighth note as well. Now, one way that I teach this is by using 2 groups, TT. So I'll have my students sing different rhythms with TT and ta, because then I can combine quarter notes and eighth notes. And then we just say rest when we have rest. So learn what those all sound like. See if you can get used to them. Next one, 16th notes. Learn the different combinations of 16th notes. Again, it's all about learning these big combinations, these patterns that you can recognize in pieces of music, and you learn what they sound like, you know what they sound like, so that when you see them in a piece of music, you can identify them, play them back, whatever it is. And if you hear them in a piece of music, you'll be able to understand them a little better too, because they won't be these random rhythms just floating around and random beats going all over the place. You'll know exactly where those different rhythms are within a piece of music and within a bar of music. Learn 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 3 eanda, 4 eanda, just 4/16 notes on every beat. Then learn 1/8 note, 2/16 notes. So 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 eanda. Learn 2/16 notes, 1/8 note, 1 eand, 2 eand, 3 eand, 4 eand. Then learn 1/16 note, 1/8 note, 1/16 note, 1e, a 2e, a 3e, a 4e. Then learn them all with different rests in different places. So a rest on the first beat, and then you have and a. So and a, or sing it with counting on my hands, and a, right? Learn 2/16 notes and then a rest. 1e, 2e, 3e, 4e. Learn 1/16 note, 8th note rest, 1/16 note, 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a. Learn all those different combinations. It can be a lot to learn and it can be kind of overwhelming, but the way I like to practice it is what we'll get into in the next step. Next thing, combine all these different things and then practice them. So the way I like to do this is with something like a rhythm sheet, where you have all of these different rhythms that are different combinations of rhythms, I should say, and then you play them through on a scale. So I have my band students, my orchestra students sometimes do this. I'll have them play a rhythm, but I'll have them play each note as a whole measure of one rhythm. So stay with me. Let's say we have a rhythm of 1 quarter note, 2 eighth notes, another 2 eighth notes, and then 4/16 notes. So if we sing it, ta, ti, 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 ticka, ticka, ta, ti, 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 ticka, ticka, ta, ti, 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 ticka, ticka, ta, ti, 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 ticka, ticka. So we have quarter note, 2 eighth notes, 2 eighth notes, 4/16. You could also count it as 1, 2, and 3, and 4 eanda, 1, 2, and 3, and 4 eanda, whatever it is. Whatever way you like to learn it, do that. But I have them play that rhythm. That whole rhythm is played on one note. So you have D, let's say, a whole thing, ta, ti, 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 ticka, ticka, or 1, 2, and 3, and 4 eanda, all on D. Then they move on to the next note of whatever scale they're playing. Let's say it's E. Whole rhythm again, whole measure. Next note, let's say it's F. Whole measure again. Next note, whole measure. Go all the way up the scale. You could do this on guitar with strumming if you want to. It's a great strumming exercise. On piano, you could do it with some type of accompaniment or something similar. Whatever you want to do. If you're playing flute or trumpet or violin, play the rhythm with same thing. You're tonguing each note on flute and trumpet with that rhythm. Violin, you're changing bows every single time. Whatever it is, get used to those different rhythms, or just honestly, if you wanted to, play a bar of one way of dividing up 16th notes. So you have 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. That's your measure. That's all the note D you play with that whole rhythm. Then you move on. Next note, E, and so on. I mean, it looks kind of repetitive and it gets kind of simple if you actually write everything out, but try and do that. Practice your scales that way. It'll get you a lot more comfortable reading rhythms and a lot more comfortable with playing rhythms and knowing how they all sound and just organizing them in your head a little bit. Just the sheer repetition and like comfort level you have with all of these different combinations of rhythms. Another thing I like to do, because I play piano and guitar, is look at the cumulative rhythm of a piece of music. So this kind of only applies to instruments that you play multiple parts on, like piano, but look at a piece of music and see if you can figure out what would be the total rhythm of the whole section. So if you have 2 different parts, add them together, sort of like condense them as if they were all on one note. What is every single rhythm that you have in that song? It's a great exercise to do if you're reading orchestra music, because then you can just identify more quickly what the whole thing will kind of sound like, because you know the general rhythm of everything rather than just the rhythm of the violin part or just the rhythm of the French horn part. So get used to being able to recognize what the cumulative rhythm is if you really want to practice it that far. Doing that will really make learning rhythms a lot easier, because you're focusing so much on rhythms and combining different rhythms together. But it can take a lot of practice to get used to, so just be aware of that when you go into it. Next little thing of rhythms that you can learn is triplets. These are kind of complicated, so we'll try and go through them quickly, but we'll get through them. So you have quarter note triplets, eighth note triplets, and 16th note triplets. Learn what they all sound like. See if you can sing different types of triplets. So quarter note triplets are probably going to be the hardest, because they create a polyrhythm of 3/2, and they kind of clash with the rhythm a little bit more, but that would be quarter note triplets would sound like this: ta, 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 ta. Eighth note triplets would sound like taka, ta, taka, ta, taka, ta, taka, ta, ta. And 16th note triplets are going to be the fastest, so I'm going to have to slow down the tempo a little bit, but taka, ta, taka, ta, taka, ta, taka, ta, taka, ta, taka, ta, ta. With triplets, try and do triplet or 1-E-A, something like that, to learn them. I don't have something fancy for 16th note triplets just because they're so fast, but I would just do takata, 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 takata. You'll sound a little bit like Migos, because Migos uses them a lot in their rap songs, and just get used to the different combinations of them. I know it can be a lot, but what are you gonna do? Not learn them? Like, so there is a book called Progressive Steps to Syncopation for the Modern Drummer that can be really useful with learning rhythms. Looks like this. It's not by Ted Reed. It's not the most fancy book in the world, and it's not super exciting. I'm gonna be honest, some of this stuff is kind of boring, but it's basically different rhythms, different rhythm exercises that you can do with either patting your leg or clapping and stomping or tapping your foot. It's supposed to be for drummers to play bass drum and snare drum, or tap your foot and play snare drum, but we can use it to learn rhythms even if you don't play drum. Get that book. It can be really useful. I hated it when I originally took guitar lessons in 3rd grade, because I was in 3rd grade and I wanted to play rock music, not clap. But if you are serious about learning rhythms and you seriously want to get better, get that book. It'll help you a lot. Run through them, make sure you can do all the different syncopations and all the different rhythms. It'll work. So one way you can practice this with ear training is listen to hip hop music and listen to what different rhythms people are using in their raps. It can make hip hop music, if you're not super into it, much more interesting, because you're really focusing on literally what they're doing. Like rapping, it's about lyrics and it's about rhythm. So listen to what the rhythm is. See if you can figure it out. See if you could notate it, or see if you could figure out how you could tap out the same rhythm that they just sang. It'll really get your ear tuned in to what these different combinations of rhythms can sound like and what they sound like together. Last thing is, this takes a lot of practice, so don't get frustrated. It takes time. For almost everybody it takes time, right? If you can imagine all of the different combinations of quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes, plus all of those different types of rests for just a measure of 4/4, I don't know exactly how many different combinations there are of that, but imagine how many that would be. That's kind of, to get really comfortable, where you need to get to, where you can learn all of those. So it's a ton of combinations, so it will take time. It'll take practice, but that's part of the fun, is getting used to these new funky rhythms, learning all these new rhythms. So don't be discouraged when you're like, oh my God, this is way too much to learn. Don't be discouraged. It's a lot to learn, but it is learnable. Just for one day, one practice session, focus on 1 or 2 rhythms. Next practice session, a couple more rhythms. Next one, a couple more rhythms. If you do that every single day for a year, you have, over 700 rhythms that you've worked on, right? So you can do it if you just slowly, incrementally work on it. So those are my tips for learning rhythms, getting better at rhythms, getting better at learning rhythms and recognizing rhythms and seeing rhythms and being able to play them, all that fun stuff. I hope they're useful. Let me know in the comments what rhythms you struggle with. Let me know. I can make a video about going through them, explaining them. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. I hope you learned something about music. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and as always, thank you for watching. See you next time. Peace.